Hello, welcome to the stream. Sorry we're running a little bit late. Technical difficulties again, but for those of you out there watching live, thanks. And today we're going to do it a little different than usual. Gotta mute myself. There we go. We're going to do it a little bit different. We're going to start off pretty casual, just look at some memes or other news articles, have some reactions between the three of us. And then after about an hour, we're going to move into more of a structured conversation on gun laws. So I'll kick it off with the first one here. Our new process of showing links is Mr. Trump playing golf. What do you guys think?
Chris, can you see that?
Let me pull this up real quick. Oh, yeah. Oh, God.
Oh, yeah, that's some good stuff right there. Well, yeah, I mean, I guess I'll take this one. So, okay, so for those of you who don't know, the underlying idea here is that Trump, some articles came out. Trump is alleged to have called wounded vets or people who died in combat losers, suckers and losers, I believe, which, if true, really pisses me off. And so you end up with this lovely election day fodder right here, this meme of him golfing in Arlington National Cemetery. So for the record, conservatives know that he has lots of personality flaws. Well, most of us do. But he's going to put through a policy prescriptions.
Yeah, I saw something today that said many Republicans are Republicans despite the president, not because of the president. I thought that was an interesting take. But
yes, despite would be a good word. In some cases. In some cases, it does stuff well, we think.
All right.
This stuff,
what are your thoughts, Nathan, on that? Do you feel that what is the conservative? I'm truly interested in this. What is the conservative perspective on this presumptuous saying of Trump? Do you think he actually did it? Is it like on the conservative side, is it a consensus that yes, he did it, or is it more like, yeah, he did it, but we're gonna forgive this one too, or just let it slide because we love that republicanism in the White House?
There's a little bit of both, obviously, right? So whenever I see those articles, just as the common conservative I am, I don't click on those articles. There's some articles I'll dive into, but it makes me cringe on the inside. I hate it, and I really hope that he didn't do it. That being said, I give it a solid 30-60 that he did it. Right? I think 30%.
So you think 30% chance he did and 60 he didn't?
Yes, because anybody who comes from behind the scenes, anybody who's met Trump, always talks about how nice he is. Especially,
what's the other 10% there? You mean 40-60 chance?
Did I do 30?
30,
oh, no, wait. Yeah, no, I did it totally wrong. Yeah, the other 10% is that it's the Matrix and we're all in a simulation.
The other 10% is Republican math.
Right, yeah, Republican math.
No, I think I'd think it's a 60-40. I don't necessarily think all of the reporting on that was true. I definitely don't think that the reporter went out and made up things. I think there's at least people. So he kind of gave background on this. 4 anonymous sources said that he said the losers and suckers part, and 3 other sources, I think, were in another part of that article. But there were 7 different sources that corroborated all different pieces of this, but they're all anonymous, and that's the big thing that people are talking about.
I forgot to mention that. It's the fact that they were all anonymous. Listen, it's not proof either way.
Anonymous?
Say what?
I said hip hop anonymous. Anyone watching, put in chat what that's from.
Oh, God. I do have to say, even though it's anonymous sourcing and typically, so I feel like this is the first time I'm really using my journalism degree in full swing. But even though it's anonymous, typically major news headlines will occasionally go by anonymous source, right? Occasionally, if everything else is backed up.
Oh, everything in Trump-Russia collusion was anonymous, right?
Well, no, not really. I mean, a lot of stuff came out. The reality is that side topic, but that was a slow drip. If every genuine not allegation, but like sentence occurred at the same time, it would have impacted this way more than the slow drip that it was. But going to this, for the editor-in-chief to have published this from the Atlantic, he just put his whole career on the line, right? Like, so this person coming from the editor-in-chief spot, if these anonymous sources came out to be wrong, this dude just put his whole career on the line. So that's powerful to me. So that's a major risk.
Is the Atlantic a right-leaning newspaper?
No, it's a left-leaning magazine, I believe. I mean, interesting to me. There is risk. I mean, if it comes out that he made this article up, his career's over, regardless if you're left or right.
The journalism community would eat him. He would not have a job.
I disagree. The New York Times put out the 1619 Project, which was pure fiction, like almost literally pure fiction, and nobody's been fired over it. So I
don't know any information about that, but I can tell you from my perspective that guy would lose his job if it was fake. Not if the anonymous sources lied to him. I mean, as a reporter, you can only do as much as verifying the sources. But if they were 4 people that were at the place that this would have been said, and all 4 of them corroborated it, even if they all got together and said, "Hey, we're going to lie about this," haha. I mean, the reporter can't really be held liable for that. But an interesting thing that I thought was, even though these 4 sources are anonymous, multiple news outlets have since corroborated it, which means they know who these sources are as well. They've spoken to them as well and gotten the same stories. So even though they didn't publish the article themselves or weren't the first ones to do it, they also have received data saying that this was said. Yeah. And then you look at a lot of the counters to this from the Republican side, and the people, some of them are actually saying, yeah, he never said that. But for the most part, most of them are saying, I have no knowledge of him saying that. I never heard that. And you'll see the articles that say 10 people say this never happened. Well, 5 of those 10 were people that are just saying, I didn't hear it. That's totally different than saying it never happened.
What's more likely too is the anonymous sources were most likely high caliber sources that would be jeopardizing their careers to kind of come out and say this. So it's possible these are high profile Republicans, either in the cabinet or appointed by cabinet members, that are saying these things that would have been in earshot or in the conversations that Trump said this stuff. And so therefore, it's people don't want to rip their careers.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we should move on since this is more supposed to be a Russian roulette thing, but I'll just I'll try to stand on my principles one last time, I guess, and give it an actual college try. If true, this really, really upsets and annoys me, and I wish he would just shut up. Other than that, I'm still going to vote for him because he's going to put forward my policy principles. Next. Oh, I'll go next, actually.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, go. I will respect the Russian roulette and we will move forward.
Okay. All right. So what's the first thing I'm going to bring up here? I've got this. This one's mainly for you, Chris. So I found this meme. Yeah. So I scroll on Reddit for some reason because I really like being stressed, I guess. For those who don't know, Reddit is it's a media sharing it's sort of for memes, for articles, for communities. Everybody with common interests can get together and create things called subreddits. This particular subreddit is for the LGBTQAIP or whatever it is community.
I knew you were a member.
Oh yeah, no. Well, from each subreddit, things show up on the front page, right? So I pretty much just scroll down through the front page, and once you get past the first maybe 10 posts, politics goes away, so it's somewhat okay. But so from this subreddit, I saw this today, and I immediately thought of Chris because he's my friend across the aisle, not because he's gay. But there's so there's a subreddit called "Are the Straights Okay?" Which is r/Are the Straights Are Okay? So I'm going to ask you now, Chris: Are the gays okay? Are they okay? Because look at this right here. So it says, if you love an LGBTQ plus person and you're planning on voting for Donald Trump in November, that's an act of violence against them. Can you explain that to me, Chris?
Uh-oh.
And your video just cut out.
He might have dropped.
I duplicated myself. I'm coming back. Don't worry. I'm coming back. Okay. Ready for this? I just did the most stealth thing in the world, and I switched from my desktop, from the browser to the desktop. Oh wow, that didn't work.
You need to start the you need to go to scene collection and go to you need to go to tools and hit the virtual cam. and it'll pop it up.
Okay, give me 1 second, but I will answer this as I'm this gray blob right now. So,
all right, Tim, why don't you react to this meme? What do you think about this? Besides, it's very colorful.
Yeah, I hate generalizations like this.
There you go. That's a meme, though. You know?
I know it is, right? And I've got a few that if we get to being able to show them, depending on how long this all takes, that are similar to this and in different ways. But I mean, I don't know. I just hate seeing things like this. They don't, to me, serve any positive purpose. They don't give you a chuckle. This doesn't have any humor to it. Like the one I showed, you can get a little bit of a humor out of it. Like,
that's true.
You know that it's not real. There's really not a golf course right there, right? So, but it does get a point across and cause some humor, which I think memes should do. When I see something like this, and it's just I don't know.
Well, so to me, I mean that's probably a good way to look at memes. But to me, memes, all they are is they're concentrated ideas. It takes large narratives and it boils it down into something simple, right? That's usually what a meme is. And this is less of a meme and more of, this is kind of like a tweet in a meme. So
yeah,
you could probably just more think of this.
I mean, as far as the meaning behind it, like I don't fully agree. I haven't, for my anecdotal evidence, I would not say that I've seen Donald Trump do much that is against the LGBT community, except didn't he drive the removal of some people from the military or something?
Transgender individual.
Yeah. But which I don't really agree with. I know there's complications with having different sexual orientations and transgenders and other things in the military. I mean, just like in normal life, like would you use the men's room or the women's room? If you're cross-dresser or whatever, like just these simple questions that you don't normally have to think about. But I think I would rather attack those problems than just remove people from the situation. But but I think this is a little strong. I don't think Donald Trump, in my opinion, my anecdotal view, has been that hard on that community.
Oh, by the way, I just want to say, Chris, before, because you were the main person I wanted to hear from on this. I am going to do my best not to nitpick, and nitpicking is going out and finding all the stupid people on the other side to try to get a reaction from them.
Yeah.
All of the memes that I'm showing, they are going to be from the front page of Reddit, meaning they got upvoted to the top of the subreddit to the degree where they got put on the front page. So with that being said, Chris, what do you think about this? Do you agree with this? Disagree?
I personally am not I think the word violence kind of over amplifies. It's a little bit of an exaggeration. However, I can definitely give, that's my personal opinion. I know I have friends that will be up in arms the way I just kind of phrased that. And I'll say this because I also definitely stand up for them in those in their respective communities. So one thing, the LGBTQ LMNOP thing is relatively offensive, and I think that's pretty fair to say because it's LGBTQ, people fought really hard in this country to be able to have lesbian, bisexual, queer, transgender, so on to be.
What is Q?
Q is queer.
Queer. Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I will say that, but so this is really where it comes from, right? It comes from two things. Oftentimes, and let me finish this because I'm going to say something that immediately you can combat. So I'm just going to go for the whole kind of point. Oftentimes, people perceivably from the left and from this side of the aisle will vote against their own best interests. And what that means is for instance, predominantly white women voted for Trump, right? Even though despite all the relatively not just relatively, but straight up sexist comments, history of sexual assault allegations against him. I know you can call it Biden right now, but just speaking from the perspective of 2016, voting for Trump, predominantly white women vote for Trump. What we say is that is voting against your own best interests because you've internalized the bias that exists. It's kind of the idea of if you ask a young kid of color and a white kid, and this is, relatively tried and true social experiment, you show them a doll that's white and a doll that's black, both, and you say, which one is more beautiful? The young kid, the 4 or 5 year old that's either African-American, black, Hispanic, and the white kid will both pick the white doll. Almost 100% of the time. It's pretty messed up. So it's this idea that racism, prejudice is so powerful that we internalize it upon ourselves. I will say this. And this is where I think you would go ahead and counter. Everybody has the right to vote for who they want to vote for. I can't tell someone to vote for the way they vote. If somebody is part of the LGBTQ community and they vote for Trump, do I disagree with them? Yes, I disagree with you voting for Trump. But I'm not going to force someone to vote a certain way because of their interests. I just hope that everybody's making the most informed vote. I will say, historically, Vice President Pence hasn't been the most favorable on LGBTQ communities. I will say.
Yeah, but what has he done?
Right, nothing in the administration. Betsy DeVos has.
What has Trump done? Aside from the transgender ban in the military, which we
so cabinet members have done some stuff, and that's really where the extension is. There's some issues with being able to have transgender bathrooms in high schools. That's been the great debate. The athletes component of it, which is a really convoluted issue. There's the whole dynamic of Lynn Johnson, Secretary of Child Welfare, Secretary of HHS of the Children's Bureau, and Alex Azar. They have been a bit critical on the pro kind of religious side and have prioritized like adoption agencies to discriminate. You can look this up. Adoption agencies can, in most states as of right now, it's been protected by the administration, can discriminate against LGBTQ couples looking to adopt. So shit like that, right? Shit like that is why people don't like this administration in terms of the LGBTQ community. But with that said, I think this meme is a little bit extreme because there's not like literal violence, but yeah, there's some issues.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Fair enough.
One piece to add to that real quick. It might be, and most of these memes probably aren't going to fit this bill, but it might be that Donald Trump in this case isn't the target. It's more the Republican Party and the general stance that the Republican Party hasn't pushed any of their issues forward, while the feeling would be if it was a Democrat in office that maybe that would be pushing it more. So I think if you took out Donald Trump and replaced that with Republican Party, right, then it might also be make sense there. So
all right,
Chris, what do you got?
All right, let's see. I'm going to share my screen. I had to hop back onto the fun joy of a browser. So give me 1 second. All right, I'm going to pull up this link. It should work out really well.
Nope.
Can you guys see this?
Nope. That's going to mess everything up. You got to close it. Can you send one of us the link in the chat?
Yep, I'll drop it in the chat right now.
Okay.
I don't mean to cause mayhem.
No, that's fine.
Chaos.
Technical difficulties, people. We're working on it. Each week it gets a little better. I'll grab it.
All right.
All right. This is my favorite thing I've seen this week in a really depressing way. So Michael Cohen's book, not a meme, but a good, juicy headline. Definitely kind of like the close to campaign firepower is Michael Cohen says Trump hired a fake Obama before White House run. And if you scroll down, he did share a photo with it. So I'm waiting for the full video to come out.
This is for no. I saw this. This is for one of his things. I saw it.
This was before. How long before he ran was this?
This just came out.
I know this just came out, but
I've seen this. I've seen the picture. The picture's from behind.
Yeah, the picture. It just came out. It's This is brand new scoop where Trump literally hired another person that is an African American black. And I realize that's the left's perceptions. You really just hired. If this was Clinton, it would have been another white guy. So I realize you can combat the race dynamic. But
wait, that's hilarious.
Wow. It's hilarious in a really messed up way. He literally hired
that's
someone.
That's what humor is.
Just to
listen, okay, so it's one of those things, if you don't like the guy, you're not going to like any jokes he makes. But, I mean, this is kind of funny. If what I'm reading here is accurate, I'm not saying, it was in real life, but if he did that, this guy cracks jokes all the time, and he's genuinely funny. And I'm sure whatever this was probably pretty funny.
I mean, you say that, but almost every behind the scene, like tell all thing that you hear about him says he has no sense of humor.
Yeah, but then all the other half of all of the wait, what? I have never heard that personally.
Cohen actually says it.
I genuinely don't think this was meant to be humorous. I genuinely think this is him creating a sick fantasy.
Yeah, but I know,
but he didn't want this out.
Friend, I'll clink the beer with you any day, but you have Trump derangement syndrome. So, I mean, you don't think any of the things he says are funny.
This isn't a big story.
This is bad.
He's trying to make a video, regardless of why, how, or whatever. He's trying to make a video, and he hires an actor that looks somewhat like the person that person's portraying. To me, that's not a big story. Right?
It wasn't meant to be published.
It doesn't matter.
It was never meant to be published.
Why did he take a video of it?
If I wanted to make a video acting like I was, hanging out with Tom Cruise, I would hire somebody that looks like Tom Cruise to be in the video, right? Like,
wait, yeah. So look, I'm gonna without really knowing anything about this. I'm gonna say this is obviously him harkening back to his Apprentice days. And he's like, all right, wouldn't it be hilarious if we had like Obama on and then I could fire him because he did such a bad job? I guarantee that's what this is.
Yeah,
and I for one want to see it.
Yeah, I'll have to look into this more. But my first impressions is like, so what?
And he's employed at least.
That guy kind of looks like Obama, like for real. Like he's got
Chris. I'm just going to point out he's employed at least one more black person than you. Actually, than me. I don't know how many black people you've employed.
I'm the only white person that I've employed in my organization.
Oh, there you go. Hey, look at you practicing what you preach. Good for you, man. Good for you. Yep. Okay. All right, Tim.
I want the walk, man.
I mean, that seems racist against white people.
I didn't hire them because, I hired them. Bro. Obviously, I want...
we were going to do intersectionality today, but you didn't want to do it, Tim.
Obviously... Boy. I'm
just tired of the race conversation constantly. So
I know.
Well, here we're back. No, I wanted to genuinely hire some a staff that is representative of my students, but really talented people that I know are going to be able to handle it, and they're also all people of color, which is really great because most of our students are people of color. So if we had a whole squad of Aryan-looking people, that wouldn't go over well, right? Either.
But what if the Aryan-looking people were better at the job?
So, Chris, I was totally making a joke, man.
I know.
I think especially if the majority of the people, your clients, the people that you're working with, if you're trying to target and have a similar employee ratio to that. But even regardless, if all of the best candidates are blacks, and hire all blacks, right?
Yeah. 100%. Free market, baby. Do it.
Yeah. All right. So my next one is a two-parter because I didn't actually find a meme that has both of these next to each other, but I thought this was an interesting, in my opinion, hypocrisy on the side of Mr. Trump-a-Rooney. So he posted, for those of you who didn't know, the meme came out a while back of a Mitch McConnell face posted on top of a Russian soldier. And Trump freaked out about it a little bit, responded on Twitter. He said, "Why does Twitter leave phony pictures like this up, but take down the Republican conservative pictures and statements that are so true or that are true? Mitch must fight back and repeal." And I think he had another post after that said something like, Twitter needs to be regulated and other things like that. So the one I thought that was pretty funny, hey, where's my page? There it is. Sorry. That went along with this is not too long prior to this, Trump himself posted a bit of a doctored photo here that didn't get removed. And he didn't complain that his photo didn't get removed. So I wondered what you guys thought of. Do you think that's hypocritical at all? Or do you think it's completely different? What are your thoughts?
Can you go back to the first one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think Trump is deranged. I feel like he's definitely the type of person I just imagine is just he loves to get away with things, but anytime anything else happens, he's the first to point a finger. He's like, look at them. It's I bet Trump was that seventh grader who I don't know, put gum under the chair. But then the second he saw someone else put gum on the chair, he's like, look, Johnny's fucking up the desk.
Oh, stop it, you.
definitely was. You know it. Trump was the worst.
Perfectly respectable gentleman. He's as principled as they come. That's all I got to say about that. Look, the God Emperor right there.
War veterans are what is it? War prisoners are losers. They shouldn't have been captured. Stand up, gentlemen.
Allegedly.
No, that one's not allegedly. No, that one's on video, my dude.
I don't like it.
He literally tried to like.
That one's on video. He literally said the only reason John McCain is a war hero is because he got captured. I prefer
he has no
people
chill,
that don't
man.
get captured.
Listen. Okay, this is not an excuse for it. I promise. So full stop. Not an excuse for it. This is the thing about Donald Trump. He has no chill. So when somebody goes after him, he pulls out all the brakes and he just goes up all in on it. So be that what it may.
Yeah, I don't think that's the issue. But
no, that is. Look, man, that's a character flaw.
I think when somebody comes at him a little bit, it is. But I don't think like that downplays by far what I think the character flaw is. It's not just like I can't take it, and so I overreact. That's not what's happening. What happens is he gets to a point where he feels like he's got to come out and win, and he says more of how he truly feels about shit than he means to. It isn't like he's saying shit that he doesn't actually think or feel because he's trying to win. He's saying more about how he actually feels.
Maybe.
But regardless, back to this point, Nate, what are your opinions? Do you think he's being hypocritical here? Do you think it's totally different?
Well, so, all right, this is a very difficult discussion. Whether big tech is censoring conservatives. I believe in some ways that they are. This is like a big conversation. Like for example, back when somebody put out a video of Nancy Pelosi slurring, but they slowed it down a little bit to make it much worse. And then it was either Facebook or Twitter pulled it down, and they said that it was doctored video. Meanwhile, like, you know, all sorts of other crap was up, and I can't remember the specifics at the time. But here's what I will say, and I know the conservatives do genuinely believe that there's tech censorship, and I believe there is some merit to that, especially the bias towards conservatives. But I will admit that it's a very, very hard thing to do. I mean, Twitter has millions of posts a day, millions and millions of posts a day, and only so much staff. I think there's like 200 people in North America to deal with the posts. So, I mean, they can only do so much. From what I understand, Jack Dorsey thinks that he's doing the best he can. There's a few things that I think are structurally aimed against conservatives, but other than that, I don't have much to say on it.
Do you think...
okay, well, I mean, so you're talking on the bigger picture, which I think is a huge discussion, and anyone that's really interested in it, Jack Dorsey has done some podcasts. There's one, as I've mentioned many a times, Joe Rogan did one with Jack Dorsey, and actually he did one with Jack Dorsey and Tim Pool.
That one was a little better, if you want the conservative angle on it.
Yeah, and so it gives an impassioned conservative view on that side. I tended to think Tim Pool went a bit far in that one, but it gives some of the idea of where he's coming from, and you know, in a very good perspective. Yeah. But really, you know, in the mean talk here, I wasn't as much trying to get to the underlying issue of is there discrimination, or are they really, you know, biased one way or the other. I was 100% just asking about the fact that Trump is mad that somebody posted this doctored video and he thinks it should get taken down.
Yeah,
versus
that's idiotic.
Him posting his own doctored video.
It's obviously just he prefers one to the other. 100%. 100%. Yeah, because both of those are obviously doctored. It's not a deep fake. It's not. And for those who don't know, deep fake is when they computer generated make it look like you're doing something that you never did. Those are both obviously doctored. He likes one. He doesn't like the other. It's that simple.
Yeah, I felt like this.
Neither of those got took down, right?
No, they're both up.
Right. Yeah. So,
which is fine. I mean,
no, it's good. Obviously,
yeah.
They're obviously photoshops.
Yeah.
Yeah. Censoring. You know, I think too. It's like the censoring conversations is a genuinely philosophical challenge right now, because like certain things, like, you know, for instance, like Trump saying, you know, when the looting starts, the shooting starts, do we take that down, right? Like philosophically, conversation. If somebody on the street, if you or I tweeted,
the argument is
how would you take it down?
That incites violence, or is that just a statement of fact?
That's the argument, right? The argument why it would be taken down. The argument would be that it would be inciting violence.
Correct.
It is.
I understand that, but okay. All right. Well, we don't need to get into that tweet.
Yeah. So, Nate, you're up next, yeah?
Yeah. All right.
Trying to keep it moving.
Yeah, sorry, Chris. I think we cut you off. All right, Chris. Since we just cut you off, I want both of you on this, but Chris, you can start. Trump nominated for Nobel Peace Prize by Norwegian officials citing Israel UAE peace deal. So for those of you who don't know, real quick primer on the Middle East. So ever since Israel was instated as a nation, there has been conflict over the land that they inhabit. Basically, the Palestinians want the land or lived on the land and were either shucked off or left voluntarily and now want back in or want to be recognized in the country. And since that is the case, the entire Arab world has generally sided against Israel in favor of the Palestinians, up until very recently, when, I don't know the whole thing. You should look it up. But Trump has made some major breakthroughs in getting some Arab states to recognize Israel as a country. Like it's a very, very major step, and other countries will hopefully soon follow suit. And so he's been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize, which I think is very well deserved.
I definitely need to look more into this to like fully see the dynamics. I mean, cool. Like if I have to look into it again to like make sure like everything checks out. It is like the bar to entry for nominating. I'm not gonna criticize Trump Peace Prize just because I dislike Trump as a human being. But the reality is like there's plenty of nominations. A nomination isn't as significant as actually receiving it. So if he actually receives it, cool.
Correct.
And it's shown that merit, by merit, he's earned it. Then I'm not going to like refute that. Do I think President Trump should have a Nobel Peace Prize? No, but also the way you get a Nobel Peace Prize is not because of, the reality is if you do one really shitty thing and one really good thing, you can still get the Nobel Peace Prize because it's only measuring the really good thing.
Yeah, I kind of echo
great things. Yeah.
I kind of echo a little bit along with you, Chris. I don't know enough about what his nomination criteria was, like what this Norwegian parliament member was nominated for exactly. But a couple things for me. One, it's not it's not hard to get nominated. Like anyone can nominate you.
Apparently,
I think it's harder to win. But
no.
I mean, if you remember back, was it last year or the year before, there was reports coming out that Trump was trying to convince, was it somebody from Japan or something?
Yeah, the Japanese minister.
Like he was like, hey, you should nominate me for this, right? So the guy actually refused to do it, but at the end of the day, like all it takes is one, I think, prominent leader to nominate you, and you get nominated. So who knows what's behind this? Second to that, if Israel and if the Middle East solves all their problems and becomes a magic utopian area while Trump's in office, it doesn't really mean he did it. Now, to that point, if Trump was a key player in the fact that they were, we'll have to talk about that because I've seen very little that supports it, but I'm not saying it's not true. I just haven't heard much about it on either side, and I try and watch both sides of the media.
Mm-hmm. Well, you haven't seen much about it because they don't. The most of the mainstream media, which is left aside from Fox and a couple others, they don't want you to hear about this because it looks good for Trump. So you haven't heard about it.
I just said I watch both sides. Why would Fox not want that to be? Why would you not want? Why would they not want to support Trump?
Because they're all Nazis, right? Anti-Semitic.
And the last thing I heard about this was maybe a month or two ago, but I thought it was all about Jared Kushner and not Trump being the one that was able to drive all this. So Trump put Jared Kushner there, but is it really Trump that did it? I don't know. But the point I'm trying to make
happens, though.
The point I'm trying to make is, this is crazy if he gets it, and if he even deserves the nomination, good on him. I'm happy that he's doing something that the world's recognizing him doing positive. I wish we could do more as a country right now where the world would look at us in a positive light. Generally, we look ridiculous to the rest of the world right now, and I would love for that to change. So hopefully this is a valid thing that we really were able to help out in the Middle East and drive some improvement there. But I'm skeptical just because of how things have gone historically with Mr. Trump and this administration, that this isn't kind of overplayed. But we'll see. I'll have to look into it. I'm excited, though.
Chris?
Pulling up right now. I'm ready for it. Give me 1 second. But I do think I need to catch myself as well with the whole Trump dynamic of like, I'm definitely guilty of when Trump does something that I generally agree with, of being like one of those people I need to catch myself and say, like, oh no, we can't do that just because Trump is like simply saying it. And so, yeah, I think this falls in line with it. I do need to go do my research, but if he genuinely has improved things, I'm here for it. So I just dropped it in the group chat.
I see that. Oh, cool. And I'm able to do it. There you go, Chris.
All right. Do you guys know what this is about?
Yeah, that's hilarious. Honestly, genuinely, that's hilarious.
Is this the one that this is what happens if Trump wins again, right?
No.
So this is God.
Sure.
So
no, I know what this is about, but yeah, go ahead.
Good. That was really good. It took me a second, but that was funny. Yeah, so we have a family. Was it California, right?
Mm-hmm.
They go into the middle of the woods in middle of wildfire season, dry season. Everything is pure Kindle, and they set up a giant pyrotechnic. Maybe not a giant, but giant enough that they're doing the gender reveal party for their baby. They like, it's a boy, and then like boom, like more wildfires have damaged public property from this incident than all Black Lives Matter protests. So there's a fun fact for you.
Yeah, I heard that.
More people died from it?
Oh, no, more public property.
Property damage, gotcha.
Because, because of a gender reveal party in the middle of Kindle. Like,
that's a funny way of saying, like, can you imagine having rolling protests on the right that nearly destroyed as much property as a wildfire?
Yeah, I don't buy it. Like, I'm not like the equivalence is obviously unfair. It's apples to oranges, but I think the meme is really funny, and I think the overall incident is just insane.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a funny meme. It's a nice break from our political, more serious topics.
All right, I'll try to pick more funny ones next time, guys. I'm sorry, I just have stuff.
There's a couple funny ones out there. Because this is a political podcast, it's. Yeah, we're gonna tend to lean that way. So my next one is, unless you guys have more to say about this one, my next one's more for comedy, less for discussion. I just thought it was a pretty comical one.
Oh, I love that meme.
Oh yeah, that's an oldie but goodie.
It's an oldie but goodie.
I ran across it again the other day. I thought it was great.
You can tell he's about to say wrong. He's gearing up for it right there.
Oh man! So that's a quick one. A quick one.
What do you think? Go ahead, Chris. Tell me how much you hate him. Tell me.
Oh, I hate him. Look at his little
eyes,
eyebrow lip.
That squint. Oh my god. that orange
Look at it, dude.
squint.
He looks like a little alien.
You know what I hate?
Like, I can't.
You know what I hate more than Trump, honestly. And this is not. I'm not trying to disparage other people, but I hate the feeling I get when I think about, like, in my opinion, and this is my view, right? And I do respect that everybody has their own opinions and own views, but it's like crystal clear when he talks that he's full of shit all the time. Like, to me, it's like crystal clear. And I look at it and I'm like, how do so many people not see it or not care?
Wait,
or some combination?
No. Look, listen, Tim, if you're not getting that feeling when any politician speaks, you're getting duped. At least
there's a different level of full of shitness.
No. I'm telling you, if you think the other politicians, all of them, including the ones I like on the right, are less full of shit than Donald Trump, you are getting duped. Like, they are all as dishonest as him. You can just tell.
I disagree with that. I think the difference is that that's a really easy pop out. That's like a really easy kind of like scorched earth tactic of like debates.
And I think that's a big reason why why he's actually president, because people are like, well, everybody else is full of shit too, so I'll let it slide.
That is a very common American thought, though. Well, a lot of Americans think that all politicians are corrupt.
It is a genuine public perception, but I'll say this is like here's what really did it, right? It's the problem is we don't understand at a national level how civic engagement and like civil, basically civic duty works, right? Like we don't understand public policy and government. The reality is, if you're an elected official, like especially a senator, same thing with a Congress person in the House of Representatives, you literally have a fire hose level of information being shot down your mouth 24/7. It is a busy job on all sides of the aisle. It is a hard job. And so you have a staff, right? And so people prepare your speeches. People prepare your notes. You basically clone yourself. You hire 10 people that you really believe in, that share same ideas as you. Let's play the other side of the aisle. Ted Cruz would hire 10 mini Ted Cruzes that each of those people are like binary copies of him. Like, all right, here's mini Ted Cruz if I only spent my whole life working on the environment. Here's mini Ted Cruz if I only spent my whole life in military. Here's mini Ted Cruz if I was an aspiring speechwriter. Mini Ted Cruz that's the speechwriter is going to prepare Ted's speeches. And therefore, yeah, he is kind of full of shit in the sense that he has not written his speech, but he's hired someone to be able to prepare speeches that he's able to then articulate that would have been the same for the most part as if he had written them. He obviously can go off script.
Okay, let me give you a counterexample. So Ted Cruz specifically is brave enough to go on a lot of the shows that I like or have liked, right? He goes on Louder with Crowder, and he'll actually talk to him. And he is... So maybe aside from Trey Gowdy, he's the most genuine congressperson I've ever heard speak on camera, right? He's come across as the least filtered, still very polished, and the most honest. And the thing is that even with him, and he's one of my favorite politicians, right? And I don't actually like very many politicians. I don't even really like him necessarily. Even him, the guy that I like the most, you can just like... A lot of the times he's pretty good, but you can just feel the pivots and the swivels and the like whenever Crowder's about to nail him down and say something really conservative, he just kind of like does a little spin in the conversation, kind of like now he's not really answering that question and he's moving away from it. It's like none of them are they're not mouthpieces for your genuine ideology, left, right, or center. It doesn't matter who you are. They're not there to speak truth. They're there to speak what gets them elected. And that's not necessarily wrong. That's just how you get elected.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the point I was going to get back to was I don't disagree with you that all politicians are some level of scuzzy.
You're a little quiet. Can you move your mic up on your mouth?
Yeah, is that better?
Yeah, it's better.
I don't disagree with you that on some level all politicians are that way. And especially, less... I think a lot more less of the bullshit I'm lying to you part and more of the I'm avoiding answering specific questions part, because they know that answer is going to be divisive. And as soon as you alienate somebody, they're not coming back, right? Generally. And that's what politicians try to do, is walk this fine line of not really answering the question, but trying to make you kind of happy. Trump's taken that a completely different way. So yeah, I totally agree. Politicians are all kind of schemy and scuzzy that way, but the level of bullshit that comes out of Trump's mouth and just pure lies, and like he'll say one thing to one group and one to the next, to me is so blatant and obvious that it's like he's got to be thinking in the back of his head, like, how fucking moronic are all these people that are voting for me and like not catching on that I'm full of shit. I'm so good. I'm so awesome because my lies are, accounted for as truths. Like, I don't know. It just... it's weird, man. Trump's just he's a different animal when it comes to how he's approaching it, and it obviously worked for him, and it may who knows, it may work for him again for this next election. But yeah, interestingly, I meant this meme to just be a laugh, not a actual discussion.
Wow. Here we are, we're a bunch of straights, and we take everything seriously.
Yeah,
for the sake of it, though, it is a really... political scientists are going to study someone like Trump for a long time, and not because he's unique. There's plenty of other countries in the world that you have someone come up that is doesn't really represent ideology. That's the reality. Is Trump really doesn't represent, like, he represents a lot of things. I just don't know which one is authentic, right? And so look at him. The fact he really can just say whatever and gets elected. It's a very interesting like dichotomy. It really is. Just looking at it from like, what the hell? Like, how can you just look back to the way other Republicans looked at him in the primaries in 2016? Everyone was like, "There's no way." Even Ted Cruz. Right? You look at their like, it's, and then now they're like, oh, it's wild.
Yeah. All right. Let's. We got time for one more. It looks like. Yeah, one more. All right. We got 5 minutes, boys. So I am going to do. Oh man, I might even.
Yeah, well, we started late, so we have a couple extra minutes if we want to keep doing this.
Ish. Yeah.
I did send the quality funny one.
You did. I like it, and the problem is that I'm gonna want to talk for another couple hours on it. You know.
I know we'd have to commit to being quick on that one. It's funny, but it has to be quick.
Can we commit to be? You know what's funny is my next thing was also about Jacob Blake. So let me see here. So.
Oh God.
All right, so this is something that I wanted to talk about with media bias and how kind of insidious it is. So we're gonna show both of these actually. So we'll just do this one for now. Okay, so for those who don't know, Jacob Blake was a black man who was killed by police in Wisconsin. Was it? I think it was Kenosha.
Well, it says shot.
Shot. He was shot 7 times.
He survived.
He survived. Okay.
No, he survived.
So, we actually had a conversation about this a couple podcasts back. So I kind of wanted to bring it up because more information has come out. So I recommend everybody goes back and listens to the podcast. We kind of go through what we knew at the time, which was not too much. We pretty much had the video and speculation. And it turns out that
happened.
What?
It had just happened at the time.
It pretty much had just happened. I think it was a couple days before that. And so at that time, I believe I'd said that I'd heard that there was a knife or that he was reaching for a knife.
Yeah.
And it turns out that was 100% correct, that he was. I found out later that he also resisted arrest. He got tased twice. He didn't go down. The reason why he was getting arrested was because he was there and he digitally raped the woman and he was trying to take her house keys. Resisted arrest. But tased twice, wouldn't stay down, wouldn't stop when he was told to. They drew their firearms on him, followed him around the front of the car. He opened up his door, which had his 3 kids in the back, and there was a knife on the driver's side floor. And in my opinion, because you look at the video, he was not trying to get in the car because he didn't put his foot up. He leaned in, and he was going to grab the knife, probably, at which point he got shot 7 times. Now, Chris and I disagree on this probably. But I wanted to point out that they wrote an entire article. This is from The Independent. This is your non-biased journalism here. You look at this title. So he probably was reaching for a knife. So what's the headline? Jacob Blake was. So Attorney General Barr incorrectly claims that Jacob Blake was armed when he was shot by police. Now, this makes it look like he was just absolutely a victim, right? This just makes it look like unarmed black man was shot, right? That's essentially what you could get from this title, which is what most people just read. Now, I could go down through here. Sorry, I should have had it highlighted. I could go through here and find the point.
Title incorrect.
The title. So the problem is that the title is not.
Is he incorrect?
Correct, but. But the title makes it seem like this was a completely unarmed black man, unprovocated shooting. Again, this fits the narrative, like he was just unjustly shot, when in fact he was reaching for a knife.
To me, that title is actually not targeting Jacob Blake or the situation at all. It's targeting Attorney General Barr. It's saying he was wrong. His claim was wrong. It's not like, oh, you should feel bad for Jacob Blake. It's saying Attorney General was wrong. Like, that's the first thing I get about it.
Right, so my point, it's a very fine point. It's not that this is technically incorrect. My point is that this it's very much designed to make it seem like he was completely unarmed. That's exactly because most people just read titles, right? Can we all agree?
But again, that's what I'm telling you. If I read that title, my expectation of this article would be that it's more focused on Attorney General Barr and less focused on the Jacob Blake situation, although it's going to be intertwined because it's about that. And if you're looking at it, it's saying Mr. Barr suggested he had a weapon, right? It's actually talking about Mr. Barr's comments. So to me, this isn't about trying to twist.
It is talking about the incident. It goes through the incident on this.
I understand that, but it seems like the focus of this article is about Attorney General Barr and his misstatement that he had a weapon.
What's the motivation?
He was armed.
What is the motivation for painting that very fine distinction?
If you want to believe
it's the difference between unarmed
if you want to believe
and about to be armed.
So if I'm guessing this article would never have been written if Attorney General Barr had never said anything except, Jacob Blake was reaching for a weapon. But at some point, if Attorney General Barr says he was armed when he got shot, and that's a misstatement, then why is it an issue to go out and say, no, he was wrong, he was not armed? Now, I agree that without knowing all the information, you may look at this and say, oh, they shot an unarmed black man, but that's not the point of this article.
That is the point. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay, and I'm telling you I don't agree. Now, do I think that this has a political bias? Sure, I think that this is trying to speak out against Attorney General Barr. It's still biased. You said this is a non-biased one, but I still feel like there's a bias against Mr. Barr.
Right, I said it sarcastically.
I don't think that's that large of a distinction, generally. Like, if he was an inch away from having it in his hand or having it in his hand, so I'm not going to say... he's an attorney.
Correct. Yes, I understand. I'm not saying that he was 100% correct in saying that. I'm saying the point of writing the article with that specific headline and then with little bits that further on that made it just seem like, oh, there was a knife on the driver's side, but there was no evidence he was grabbing for it. Right?
It does say right there, there's no evidence that supports the claim he was armed or suggests his intention was to grab the knife, which... Right.
If you watch the video, that's just absolutely untrue.
Well, no, it's not really. Like, that's subjective. I actually agree with you that I think it looks more like he was probably going to grab a knife, but I don't think that it's conclusive and that you should be up in arms about somebody having a different opinion of that. Like that, he's behind a car door, either trying to get into his car...
Not trying to get in. His foot wasn't up. He was leaning down.
He's also getting pulled on by the cop, so he's trying to pull himself away.
So his foot would be up. His foot would be further up. He would fall backwards.
If you're getting yanked on by the back of your shirt, are you going to be lifting your foot up to try and put it up inside and not expect you're going to get pulled over? Or are you going to try and go in head first to grab onto the steering wheel and pull yourself into the car?
Not to manipulate or to use your words incorrectly, but kind of, and I agree with you, like you said, when the other kid who shot that dude calls his friends instead of going to the police, you had a really valid argument. He was in fight or flight. He was in trauma. He killed someone. His blood is still rushing. You do some weird shit. I'm sure that this dude, Jacob Blake, if you're in that moment, it's unless he pulled the knife out of the car and kind of branded it at the police, then there's no evidence, right?
That wouldn't happen.
Maybe he was trying to tumble himself into his car, right? Maybe he was just trying to lean in and get inside. Maybe he genuinely wasn't thinking anymore.
So there's a couple distinctions, right? So he was there getting arrested. He was getting arrested for rape and trying to steal somebody's keys, right?
Yeah,
he was resisting arrest.
My opinion of the Jacob Blake shooting has changed over the last couple weeks.
Is that
a alleged thing? It's not definite until it comes out in court, but that's he had an arrest warrant for that. That was her claim to 911, and we know that he was stealing her keys. He was not there to break up a fight.
Yeah, so what I've heard since our last podcast when we talked about this, and my opinion on this whole shooting thing has changed a bit. My understanding now is that the cops were called on him, and they knew who he was, right? The call wasn't like, hey, there's a guy on the side of the road and they're fighting with a woman. It was, Jacob Blake is at this place. He's not supposed to. He's trying to take this lady's keys.
He's violating his...
and he had a warrant out for his arrest already, I believe. So they knew who he was. He had a warrant. This was not like a random call, and they just showed up to try and break up a fight. That changes the mindset of the officers right there. They know who he is. He has a warrant out for his arrest. So there's a lot more thought that there's motive now from this person to try and escape or maybe be violent or do whatever, versus somebody where you're like, hey, this dude just was trying to break up a fight and wasn't listening to us, right? So that changes your mental state a little bit. Huh?
Pretty challenging to conclusively, both things like Fox, BBC, Reuters, all of these are when I look at sources, I will say this: The Independent, I would not consider a viable source. I consider my benchmark is Washington Journal for the right, Washington Post for the middle, New York Times for the left. These are three viable, tried and true. These are people that will fire a journalist. All three of them, whether you like to believe it or not, all three will fire a journalist overnight for misreporting because there's 100,000 other journalists that are just as qualified to be in their position. So that's where I look at. And BBC is pretty solid. There's so many conflicting reports right now, and those three, the big ones, New York Times, Washington Journal, and Washington Post, have not commented yet on this warrant because there's just things on both sides saying like, yes, there is a warrant. No, there's not a warrant. I've been scrolling around for like a couple minutes now.
Yeah.
We really just can't be conclusive right now. Fox is saying there is. BBC is saying there's not. Reuters is saying there's not.
I'll tell you this.
But
I think we need to keep an open mind until all the facts come out, and that's why I'm saying my mind has changed based on what I know now. And when more evidence comes out, my mind will change again, right? And eventually we'll narrow in on what really happened, and then we can have a really good, valid opinion on it. But if all of this other side is true, where he did have a warrant and they were there for him, he was tased, they were fighting, there was punches thrown, he's running away, and the officers see that there's a knife in the car. I understand where they're coming from when they fired. I still have the thought that it was either excessive, that maybe 7 shots was too many, or that even any shots was too many. I still feel like the 2 officers should have been able to detain him and keep him down, but those are anecdotal thoughts. Like, I'm not a policeman. I've not been trained. I've not been in those situations. I've since watched a lot more videos on police and interactions and things. There's a kind of an interesting YouTube channel called The Donut Operator, if you guys have ever seen that or heard of that. He's a former police. He's very police supportive in most of his videos, or in all of them. But he's constantly showing interactions between police and civilians and how things can go down, poorly. And there's a couple other I've been watching to get a better idea of like, what does the day-to-day look like and how fast these interactions change and happen, right? So, but the point you brought this up wasn't to talk about Jacob Blake. It was to say, the left and the right report on the same thing and different based on what you were saying. But I actually think that the article you put up there has isn't about Jacob Blake. It's about Attorney General Barr misstating. It's
about the narrative. I would disagree on that, but so we did probably about 12 minutes on that. So let's do we're gonna do Chris's real quick, and then we're getting into gun rights because we're gonna probably run over on gun rights too. But so for those who don't know, which is just about everybody, so last week we took a hiatus because we had a whole bunch of technical stuff to work on, and that is actually this. This is what you see. So we finally got most of this worked out. We're still trying to bring Chris up to snuff, but we ended up having a fairly long, fairly passionate discussion about Kyle Rittenhouse. And for those who don't know, Kyle Rittenhouse was, he was an informal militia member who was at the scene of a Kenosha riot. He was ostensibly defending a car dealership from the rioters and looters because 2 dealerships had been burned the couple nights before. He ended up killing one person. He ended up killing 2 people, one of which Chris has grudgingly admitted was self-defense. Grudgingly. He still doesn't like him. And then the next 2, I think most of us agree, was a tragedy because the crowd might not have known that he was doing it in self-defense and they charged him. Anyways, it's highly contentious. Chris probably hates me even for characterizing it like that. And so we have this meme. And
it's a good meme. It's just a quality meme. I don't think we need to go partisan on it. It's just a funny meme.
Yes, we don't need to go partisan on it because it is a funny meme. And comedy is supposed to make fun of things that are serious.
Like him. That's the funny part.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. We'll agree with that.
Looking at that, I knew exactly who that was supposed to be. Like, no doubt in my mind.
I'm a militia. Yeah, I get it. So
I'm not trying to poke fun at the situation. It is a terrible, crazy situation, but that is a funny meme because of how much it. I mean, I don't know why it just triggers in your mind. Like that's who it is.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, Chris doesn't like the fact that he was there that night. This meme is making fun of the fact that the 17-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse decided to show up from militia duty in the middle of a riot. So, and that may be valid. That may be valid. My lips look really red on my camera.
You got it.
Okay, all right.
Judy.
I got one real quick that I think you'll appreciate.
Okay, all right.
This is you will like it. There you go, bud. What do you think?
What do we got? It's all small. CNN.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, I didn't think I'd get much argument from you on this one, Nate.
Wait, what's it supposed to mean? Hold on. Everything's on fire. Then he puts the CNN. Oh God, yes, I love it. It's mostly peaceful.
Yeah,
I love
exactly.
it. That's so good. Hey, for those of you that don't know, CNN literally had a reporter standing in front of a burning building in the middle of a riot, and he said, Tom, it's mostly peaceful out here. It's been mostly peaceful all day long, and there's a raging inferno behind him that the rioters set on fire. Just very, very memeable.
Another
good
one that's
stuff.
A laughable one. These are not discussions. I got a few that are just fun to look at, so take a look.
For those of you who don't know, there was a Trump boat rally, and I guess six of the boats foundered and sank. Like 6 total.
Yeah.
That's incredible. I guess, what was it? The bigger boats ended up foundering them, I think?
Yeah, they were all going too fast in a smallish lake or something, and they caused a bunch of heavy waves and wake, and some of the small boats sunk because of it. But I thought Poseidon for Biden was just a pretty funny take on that.
It's hilarious.
And the lady's face right here, you might not be able to see it on this screen because it's small, but I thought it was pretty funny.
All right, who wants to kick us off for gun rights? Come on, we got to do it. We're out of time here.
How about you, Nathan? Let's say if you kick us off.
I could do it.
Actually, you know what?
Oh my goodness gracious, we got some comments too. Okay, wow. Man, I don't know if we're going to be able to do all these comments and finish this thing off.
It's okay. So a lot of those are probably mine. I've been actively chatting in the interims and stuff in our chat. So I've been trying to be a little more interactive with our viewers.
Shout out to chat. We love you guys. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for watching. Thanks for being here. And let me know if me chatting is distracting at all when I'm on video and stuff, and I will stop doing it. But I thought it'd be good to have a little interaction with them. So
I think it's been pretty good. So we'll try to address any questions. Keep in mind if there are any. Go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
Who had the best memes?
Yeah, who had the best memes?
There you go.
Yeah, but I think our sample size is too small. There's probably a little bit of a bias in the other.
Might be the best one. If you're looking for meme quality, I think Poseidon for Biden might have been the best one.
Look, it's not fair. I went so square with all mine.
That's you're a square.
Okay. My girlfriend said my meme game is weak, but I was really proud of the gender party one.
Dude, I've got pages. I've got pages of memes. I got so many more I wanted to show, and most of them were just comical.
I know. Okay, so but if we're gonna do that, we have to stop being us and start actually.
Right. Yeah. How about I'll go 10 seconds a piece.
No, you can't, bro. We're already way over time.
We're over time.
But this one's so good. Look at this one. This one's so good.
Just play what? I can't read that.
Just play through.
Is that a golf reference?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, all right, let's talk about guns.
Here's this one.
Hey, Tim.
Anyone know who that is? Who is that? Anyone know who that is?
John McCain. Everybody knows. All right, control yourself. Okay. All right. So we're going to try to do guns in 45 minutes because I still want to address comments if there's any addressable commenents.
To be honest, Nate, we're probably going to agree. I'm going to disagree with some people on my left. And so we'll probably be in more agreement than you would probably expect. Okay. So this might actually be a quick debate.
Okay.
Go for it.
All right. So bottom line is that I want a tank, right? I accept nothing less than that. Tanks for everybody on demand for free, right? Second Amendment. Anybody? Any takers? Chris, you agree with me?
There's no reason. Well, let me ask you this. Should our tanks be can I have tank ammunition as well, or is it just a tank?
It's just a tank.
Well, then it's
no. I want. They developed a submunition that was a small yield nuclear warhead. I want that for everybody. Everybody gets one of those, and then a few of the regular ones.
Absolutely not.
Okay, all right. So I'm kidding.
The memes were over. What is this?
All right, I'm kidding.
Absolutely not.
Okay, and also, sorry.
Have you seen those videos of you must Nate, when this podcast ends, for the sake of this, just go YouTube like high-speed police chase of a tank. It destroys the road.
Oh my God! Yeah,
it destroys everything. It just goes up and over cars and embankments, and it just destroys everything.
Nathan, do you know how much hatred I have for I-84 because of how much construction is on our highway? Can you imagine rolling it with a tank? There'd be construction forever. Horrible. There already is construction forever.
I have no doubt the American roads would bear up under the weight of such patriotism.
That's
okay,
right.
All right.
For the bald eagle.
Right.
Oh.
Okay, all right. So I'm kidding. Not obviously, because some people do say that, but I'm kidding. So, all right. So the Second Amendment in like 40 minutes or less. So here's the Second Amendment. Let's do that. We'll start off real simple, and then we'll work our way out from here. Okay. So the Second Amendment, quote, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Shall not.
You know my favorite part about
what? Go ahead.
But you know what my favorite part about this amendment is, what? And I know I'm pulling this from someone. Someone else made this joke, and it's literally like I feel like the founding fathers were like, "Fuck, this is a really controversial issue." So I feel like they took a couple sentences, chopped them up, and just threw it like confetti, and it all fell down. And like that's how we're gonna write it, just like that, because that is so off what English would have been back then. Like, look at every other amendment. Look at the Constitution. Look at like any writing. Look at old Thomas Cabin. Nothing was written like this line. They literally were just like, we're just gonna let this be interpreted for a couple hundred years and see what happens. It's bad.
Well, they obviously didn't anticipate. I mean, one of the the left's arguments against it is nobody anticipated high capacity, high volume rifles. But let me outline this real quick here. So there's so I probably should have done this first, but there's two main thrusts of the argument, right? One of them is what do I think it should be, right? And we can all talk about that. And then the other one is what does the current amendment say that it should be, right? And so we can start with what does the current amendment say it should be. And this one's kind of tough. You basically have to be a constitutional scholar to really be able to answer this. Like, you understand the people behind it and the language of the time and all that kind of stuff. But the conservatives' main thrust in this is that this means that whatever, generally speaking, whatever arms and generally people say rifles that your military has, you should also have. But conservatives aren't even really gung-ho on that. They'll just take an AR-15, right? But so the thrust... So basically, it looks to us like the Second Amendment wants us to be able to perform military insurrection, right? A militia, something organized to be able to fight off invasion or fight off a tyrannical government. That was the intended purpose of the Second Amendment. And conservatives argued that that's being massively diluted. Although it's not explicitly stated what is included, modern military firearms include long guns with massive, high volume of fire capabilities and all that kind of stuff. So it seems to me that an AR-15 is probably the least, that you should be able to ask for. And then some stupid states like Connecticut banned it. So that's kind of where the right is on that. Where's everybody else?
Well, let's real quick before we get into what everybody else. Let's break this apart segment by segment, right? Let's just let's talk about the first component, right? Our little piecemeal. A well-regulated militia. Do you think that constitutionally, first and foremost, we're going to throw out the argument, if it's okay with you, on either looking at this as like an elastic clause or strict constructionist or living, breathing document, right? Is this a living, breathing document that allows us to adjust, or is it a strict constructionist idea? I think that's just too far out of our scope of this podcast to dive into.
Probably too far out of the scope.
But what we can talk about is, should we define a well-regulated militia? Because I don't have an answer for this right away. I want to hear your thoughts, genuinely, Nathan. Is a well-regulated militia meant to be? Is that meant to be defined as like a group of people, like just like if you and I want to start a militia, or is it meant to be the actual military?
A well-regulated militia is to be what it says. So it would be the colonial sense where white males over the age of 18, property owners, I think, or just white males over the age of 18 became part of the militia. And then that militia drilled regularly on the green. that is the intent of it. And I will concede any attacks on this particular part because we have obviously moved away from that. Although I did bring up a list of the current active militias in the United States. As you can see, it is not a massive list, but all of these here are independent militia organizations. So militias do exist. I don't claim to be part of one, nor do I hinge my Second Amendment claims on that. How's that sound?
That's pretty solid. I agree with that. Because I've always personally, I've always interpreted it as like a well-regulated militia is like the federal government's military. It's like, in addition to having,
I think there is a distinction. I will disagree. I will push back on that.
I agree with Nate on this, that a well-regulated militia means that a militia that's capable of performing their duty as a militia, not that it's regulated by the government or any other body.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. No, I generally value your perspective because that's not something I haven't genuinely dived into that line before. So I was like, you know what? Let me catch Nathan right now and just ask you this.
Yeah.
So we can kind of just being necessary to the security of a free state. I mean, obviously that kind of speaks for itself.
Yep. Explanatory, self-explanatory there. The right of the people to keep and bear arms
shall not be infringed.
Yeah.
Right. Now
this is where this is the line that I think the biggest disagreement exists on, because for us on the left, really the argument is like, okay, the right to bear arms. To what extent can we bear arms? And you say to not be infringed, but let's look at the easy, tried and true kind of counter argument for this is well, look at the First Amendment, right? We say freedom of speech, but it's not unconditional freedom of speech. It's if I yell fire in a crowded theater, that's the famous example, then that is genuinely illegal, right? Because you're gonna create a stampede. People are gonna get injured from your speech. You can, for the most part, satire is protected 100%. For the most part, libel is almost all entirely protected unless you can absolutely prove somebody has said something dishonestly, publicly disparaged your name. It's pretty protected. It's pretty hard to Hulk Hogan was successful, and that's a second, right?
He took down what was the site he took down with
Gawker.
a libel suit? Gawker. Gone.
It was really, everyone was mind blown by it, honestly, because it was actually, it really was wow, we actually passed a libel suit. It's hard to pass it. So, but with that being said, freedom of speech is not unconditional in our country. It's pretty unconditional, but not entirely. There's restrictions, and so the left likes to use that as kind of okay, well maybe people shouldn't have, we shouldn't let Jeff Bezos. I'm just throwing his name out there. It can be any billionaire. Use any billionaire you like. We'll say Elon Musk should not be allowed to create a arsenal of fighter jets.
Right. Yeah.
But he can create an arsenal of
space jets.
I was going to say satellites. He's putting tens of thousands of satellites up.
Right, and so I can understand. You're probably what you're doing is you're probably walking this into what we actually believe. So we can skip ahead a little bit. Most the vast majority, unless you're a really hardcore sort of anarcho-libertarian, really really free, gonna go live in the wild types. Most people agree on most of the reasonable restrictions. Where you're gonna start running into some of the pushback is on the people will say, in order to be an effective fighting force, we should have M16s, which are fully automatic. Some people will say that, but that is not the main thrust of the conservative argument. Most of the main thrust of the conservative argument is that we want to be able to have semi-automatic long guns, right? And to us, that is the ability to throw rounds with accuracy at a distance, with a decent magazine capacity, right? With semi-automatic functionality. So for those of you who do not know what the difference is between automatic, semi-automatic, and bolt action, let's say.
Finger pull,
right. So on an automatic weapon, you pull the trigger and bullets just keep coming out the end, right? And that's how you can suppress a target. You can put a lot of rounds in the same place and hopefully one of them hits. It's a very, very easy way to mow down a lot of people at once, say if you were going to be a school shooter. So most people don't really have a problem with those being kept out of the average civilian's hands. Most people. Some people will agitate against that. But what the conservatives generally are asking not be infringed is the ability to have a long gun that can shoot with accuracy at a distance that when you pull the trigger, bang, one bullet comes out, then you have to let go and then pull again, bang, right? And so you can do bang, 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 and each time one bullet comes out. That's semi-automatic. Conservatives argue that is probably the least deadly, but still fulfilling the idea of a self-defense or a militia function.
So my take on the Second Amendment is let's look at where we were when this was written. And we've kind of hinted at it a little bit, but I mean, we were a population that had is just rebelling against another country. We generally were a bunch of untrained individuals, militiamen with rifles, hunting rifles, other rifles that were defending against an army. And so looking at it from that perspective, we're writing into our Constitution, hey, like, if our government becomes tyrannical and something that we don't agree with or believe in anymore, we want our population to have the ability to do what we just did, to overthrow the government and make it what the population wants it to be, right? And so to me, that's what I read the Second Amendment is. Like, we don't want to get into the same position that we were in before and not have the ability to get ourselves out of it. A lot's changed since then, though. Like, I don't care how many people have semi-automatic AR-15s. You ain't shooting down an Apache helicopter that's coming in, or a drone. True. Or like, we will not win against modern militaries. It's different than it used to be, right?
Yes.
And so
and no.
I think I don't think that, and again, don't take this as an argument that we shouldn't have any firearms. All I'm saying is the idea behind it, in my opinion, when you read that, is they wanted us to be able to have close to an equivalent or something relative that can parity. Kind of, and that's why it says a regulated militia, something that is regulated, and what that means isn't like to regulate it from an oversight standpoint, but that the militia itself is regulated and able to achieve its duty, which is to stand up to the government militarily. And it's just not possible to in this day and age. Like,
go ahead, Chris. I definitely will push back on that because there's a step further that you haven't thought about. But go ahead, Chris.
I definitely, same. I think there's two things. So I will say pretty preemptively, I'm pretty pro adding significant restrictions on firearms. But I will say this too. I also really agree with certain counters. Like, for instance, when I look at the founding fathers, there's really interesting court cases that happened right after the Revolutionary War, before the establishment of the Supreme Court at that. So this was handled by the founding fathers, like Hamilton, Jefferson, Burr. It was handled by this Congress where Americans just were putting fucking cannons on their front lawn. We're having like Revolutionary War cannons, and that can generally cause some major damage. And they had to deliberate: do we take away cannons? And they essentially said we're pro cannon because the Second Amendment. So the Second Amendment covers it. So they actually were, relatively speaking, the top military weapons of that day and age were protected by the elastic clause of the Constitution, and allowed the Second Amendment to enumerate them, to include them. I'll say one more thing, one really interesting thing. This is my favorite book in the world. I really encourage you to read it. It's called David and Goliath. It's not my favorite book, but it's up there, top 5. And the whole concept of it is like, how do underdogs win, right? The idea of David and Goliath. How did David actually beat Goliath? Was he lucky? And actually, it wasn't that he was lucky. The concept of it is that David simply played by a different set of rules. Here you have this Jude who's super jacked, literally kill anybody with like one arm, and then David comes in super agile with a relatively accurate what's the word I'm looking for? Why am I forgetting David and Goliath? David's weapon.
Slingshot.
Comes in with a slingshot that's actually was used by the military at the time. that can send like a rock going 100 miles an hour. So basically getting hit by an MLB pitcher's worth of a baseball, except a hard stone, and he just walks up and takes him out. So Goliath is ready for a sword fight. David just comes in, uses unconventional means. So I will say this. Historically, 40 to 45% of underdog militaries have won their confrontation, including ours, the Revolutionary War. So I would actually say if we really, really became passionate and had a good reason to kind of go against the government, there's actually relatively strong sense that the people could actually win through unconventional means. If we're looking at like
I think
fighting an Apache helicopter versus a bunch of AR-15s, it's going to lose. But we don't know what unconventional means look like. So I will say that there's a genuine sense of saying like a militia could actually overthrow the government.
I don't think there's no way that it happens, right? And obviously, it's possible, but historically, the difference between the average person's weaponry and what was used by governments and
correct
and paid for groups was much smaller. Right. Yeah, they may have had cannons, but they took 10 minutes to reload or 5 minutes to reload, and they only struck once.
Right, and everybody
we're now at a point.
Muskets.
Yeah, we're now at a point where if somebody wanted to from the military take out my entire community, they don't even have to send a soldier in, man. They just launch some fucking.
That's a perfect segue, though. So let me take that and pivot. So the main problem that we're having with this conversation is that we're taking the Civil War of the. We're taking the Revolutionary War of the 1700s and maybe even the Civil War, and we're sort of moving it forward to today. And so I will agree with you that in a conventional armed conflict, let's say it's the entire U.S. military. Let's just pretend that nobody defects from the military for sake of argument against the U.S. population. Obviously, the U.S. population would stack up on the other side of the field and just get mowed down, and the U.S. Army would lose nobody. The problem is that a civil war would not look like that. And that's not actually the goal. The goal is not to be able to fight and win the Civil War. The goal is to become ungovernable, right? Because if every house has a long gun, a semi-automatic long gun, you can't occupy that town without losing a whole bunch of people. And your goal as an occupying force, whether it's our government or an invader, is to occupy us, right? It's not just to wipe us out, unless it is to wipe us out. But most of the time, it's not to wipe us out. It's to occupy and govern.
Your goal isn't this unless it is this.
Well,
sorry,
it would never, because that defeats the whole point of an economy. You can't just murder.
Exactly, right. So
no. I agree with you. I just thought it was a funny statement.
No, I know. Well, you never know. I mean, maybe somebody does want to genocide us. I don't know. You never know. But
in the case of the U.S. government, I don't think that would be the case, right? Like,
no, exactly, right. And so let's say it was, Chris's worst nightmare, where it's Trump occupying the cities or something with a full military force. If they all had long guns, the price of occupation is too high to bear, right? Because you're losing people from windows, right? So your options then become, so if you're occupying a rebellious armed population with long guns, with semi-automatic long guns, your options are to kill all of the military-age males to prevent uprisings, or to accept a massive amount of casualties on a daily basis, right? And that's generally unacceptable, right? Because you're not gaining as much as you are losing. So the point of having an armed populace is it's pretty much that. It's not necessarily so that we line up on each side of the field and then get mowed down by the A-10 tank killers, right?
Right. So to kind of continue what my point was, though, because we kind of got off of it a little bit, is I think it's important to think about that amendment in context of when it was written. Like, I think too often as a population, we look at the Constitution like people look at the Ten Commandments or other things, and that they're infallible and unchangeable, right? It's like freedom, right to bear arms can never be changed because it was written down in the Constitution, and look how well we've done so far. But things change, right? So I'm not. Hold on. And again, don't
what I
take
was saying with the two different arguments. We just did constitutional. If you want to switch over to whether we still think it's right, we can do that.
Yeah, I think we should. And please don't take that. I'm not trying to say that I think we shouldn't have the right to bear arms. I'm just saying, like, it's an important distinction because there are hardliners that look at this, and they're not as rare as what I think you have made it out to be, Nathan, that think that we absolutely should 100% have the right to bear arms. And if that's ever taken away, then this country or even limited in any massive way that this country has just fallen off the cliff, right? Like, and I think it's important that whenever you think of these types of topics, to compare like something that was written hundreds of years ago in a completely different world than what we live in today. Look at the situation that was surrounding it. What's changed, and how does one thing make more sense than another? And just kind of be rational about your thoughts and not. Yeah, I guess that's the best way to say it. So anyway, since it's your kind of topic, Nathan, if you want to lead off on what you actually think.
No,
Chris,
I think Chris might be able to do it because the restrictions are mainly coming from the left. I'm curious, Chris, what. So I know there's stuff that you want to put in. I would guess, what are your main policy prescriptions if you want to try to reduce gun violence? And how do you square that against? I was going to say against the Second Amendment, but we're not necessarily doing that. What would your major policy prescriptions be to lower gun violence, I guess?
I will generally say that I'm pretty okay anchoring my perspectives in the Second Amendment, because I will say this, and maybe I'm an outlier on the left, but I would say I am an outlier on the left in this notion is that, no, I'm not. I'm definitely not. I definitely believe it's really important, regardless of how old the Constitution is, to continue to abide by it, right? Because it's that one, like, everything is made up, but then therefore nothing is made up, right? Everything we do is a made up social construct. The reality that we go to work from 9 to 5, that we eat dinner, we eat lunch, we eat breakfast. Like, there's the fundamental, like, why do we do that? And we do it because society has agreed upon that. We agreed upon it in this collective sense for hundreds of years. We to an extent can abide by these doctrines. And so I think the Constitution does set a really fundamental benchmark. The second we start going at editing it or changing it, which we can do, it's incredibly hard to do.
Very hard.
We can, but it's incredibly hard for a really good reason. And the reason for that is to avoid ending up like Russia, where if you even try to read Russia's history, every 5 years there's a new freaking constitution. It's just so challenging to even understand how do you have any semblance of order, right? And so it's not a perfect document, but nothing is. And so it's something that we've stuck to and we should continue to stick to. So when I talk about policy, I really think it's important to anchor in to that Second Amendment. As much as I disagree with it, to be honest, it's just simply put, it's something that we need to acknowledge. So I would say this, as far as policy goes, and I'm sure you actually have some really valuable counterpoints to this. Relatively speaking, this notion of universal background checks, I'm here for. I'm here for not allowing, or at least registering, any notion of, if you were to build a gun at your house right now, you do not need to register that gun if you buy a gun kit at a certain completion rate. I think that's a problem. I think digitizing the gun records is relatively valuable. Right now, there's a giant warehouse. It's like the craziest thing in the world. So whenever a mass shooting happens, because of successful lobbying from the NRA, you basically, all gun receipts are saved. We do know who owns what gun, but it's all printed, dude. So it's this one giant warehouse where some townie just has the weirdest job in the world. And whenever a mass shooting happens, they just search through box after box after box after box to see if the gun was registered legally. It's absolutely insane. I'm here for that. I'm here for, and this is where it gets hard. It's honestly, when we look at this country, we have the highest rates of suicide, of successful suicide completion. We have the highest rates of unintentional homicides in the family. The reality is, if you have a gun and you want to kill yourself, it's way easier to do it. And so most suicides are gun related. Most unintentional homicides are gun related. People, my friend, I'm going to use an anecdotal because it speaks to a normative. My friend once was coming home from class. His friend had a shotgun. He woke his friend up, and the dude opens up the door to the staircase, aims the gun at my friend, and thank God he thought for an extra second, because a lot of times people don't. My friend literally could have been shot by his roommate, and it would have been his roommate's fault, but his roommate was genuinely trying to protect his house, right? And so I think I think there's a relatively, I don't know how your thought is. This is a personal policy that I know would never pass through. I'm all here for guns being locked up, like a mandate on like you need to lock up your guns to a certain, and maybe there is in most states. I know Connecticut, we have some pretty strict gun laws.
Yeah, there's a lot of gun safe laws.
There are, but there's also a correlation. Connecticut has the lowest rates of gun-related deaths. We also have the highest rates of gun laws, right? So how do we? I think that's where I become really conflicted. How do we balance the facts that the higher we restrict guns, the lower mortality rates are, with freedom, right?
I can respond to that, right?
Yeah, let's hear it.
So I've actually used this a couple of different times to talk about the scale of what we do. So if let's pretend that gun freedom is a speed limit, right? And the lower the speed limit is, the less types of effective weaponry you can have, until, like, if you're going 5 miles an hour, all you're allowed is a musket with one musket ball. So sure. Any restrictions that we're putting on guns that reduces the usability of the gun, right? So if we're permanently locking them up and then only we can unlock it during an insurrection or something like that, or because they're already, okay, so you put gun restrictions on it like Chicago does, like Connecticut does, like all these other places do. The fact that you can reduce gun violence that way it's important, but it has little bearing on whether you should have that right. Right. So in my anecdote, right, so you could take all the speed limits around the country down to 5 miles an hour and you'll never experience a crash again. Right. Mm-hmm. But you've also removed the usability of roads now, right? Because people going across the Midwest, all the corn is going to rot before it gets to the cities and people are going to die. So I understand.
Yeah, if you look at the Second Amendment, again, it's. And this is, I actually didn't have this thought until this conversation. So, but if you look at that Second Amendment, it is really focused on militia and protecting the free state. Agreed. It's not focused on individuals having firearms for individual defense. So, yes, in my opinion, the statement of saying,
that's why we're not talking Constitution anymore.
Right, I know, but
self-defense thing is more of a more modern argument.
Right, yeah. But in my opinion, the statement, and the only reason I want to say this is for anyone that is watching this to understand where I'm coming from, because it's maybe not clear. The statement that says, you have the right to bear arms associates back to the militia. If you didn't have a right to bear arms, but you were allowed to form a militia doesn't necessitate that you can have arms. So it's like clarifying that, right? Like I think you could make the argument that it's just clarifying, look, you have a right to have arms within your militia, as a citizen. Not that you have to be in a militia to have arms, but you have the right to have arms. But it's not saying you have the right to have arms readily available, right, or on your waistband or whatever, right?
It's just bear.
Yeah, to bear them. You're allowed to bear them if you need to, right? But I'm not saying you can't defend yourself. I'm not saying you can't defend yourself. I'm just saying, like, it doesn't say you have the right to a readily available arms.
No, it says you have the right to bear arms. It did. So it would have had to specify something like communities have the right to have armories with which the militias would be armed. That would be more like how they would word something like that. But they specifically say bear arms. Yeah.
Genuine question. What is yours and if different, what's the overall rights perception on universal background checks? Why would universal background checks be like not preferable as an option? I'm curious. Like, what is kind of the argument on like why would Mitch McConnell not want to pass universal background checks?
Probably because I would have to see specifics on it, but probably because it's federally mandated. And the whole point of having a militia to stand up against a tyrannical government doesn't really stand very well if the government knows exactly who has these firearms. So generally the rights argument is going to be that, maybe at most we can have these things be run by the state, which is what we do. But having the federal government having its fingers in saying whether people can have guns is probably not a good idea. Right, because think about it, like in an insurrection state, like let's say what the far left is doing right now, where they want to overthrow everything, right? So if they had to do a background check through the federal government, the government's going to say, okay, well, Antifa's a domestic terrorist organization. We're going to go ahead and deny this based off them being domestic terrorists, right? And so the far left, and I'm speaking this way so that anybody on the far left can understand this. The far left would be like, okay, now we can't get a gun because we let the federal government handle the background checks, right? And so it sort of defeats the point of the actual Second Amendment, which is the militia to stand up against the tyrannical government or a foreign power. Make any sense?
Yeah. Yes,
but as far as the universality, right? So the thing that Mitch McConnell was probably against, and once again, I have to see the actual thing. What he was probably against was the fact that the federal government was controlling the thing, not the fact that it was universal. For the most part, background checks are universal, right? In every state, you have to do it, and there's a few exceptions in a few states, I believe, for the gun show loophole and things like that. But it is also in all of those states, it's a felony to knowingly sell weapons to a felon, right? So you're supposed to ask, and it's up to you to make sure that happens. I understand a lot of people don't like that. I know a lot of conservatives push back on that. I'm sort of ambivalent on closing that up because, I mean, most of that stuff, nobody's selling M16s at gun shows. It's mostly old shotguns and old rifles, or antiques, right? So maybe it's something that somebody brought home from World War II. But that's my 2 cents on universal background checks. Basically, it is a thing. It's just not mandated by the federal. It's not controlled by the federal government.
Interesting. So that I imagine the same argument would extend to this idea, like digitizing the existing gun record.
Yeah. You got to be so you have to be very careful about all that, because if the federal government can dip their fingers into your computer system and figure out who has these weapons, then they know who to target in an insurrection. So
what about
I know it's go ahead.
There's currently more guns than people in our country. So when we talk about these things, is it, I would say, I have to look up the exact number at this point. So I feel bad that I don't want to just throw out a number, but perceivably, at least in certain states, more than half of the state, right, would be gun owners, right? By this logic.
No, it's like 37%.
That's huge. So
yeah, well, a lot of people. A lot of people have more than one gun. A lot. Most people, I think most gun owners actually have more than one. So it's. I don't think it's ever going to approach half the population, except for in rural areas.
A third of the population. That means 100 million people in our country have a gun. Could the government actually systematically target that amount of people?
Just Thanos snap.
Well, if they go state by state, if they're careful with the propaganda, if they control the image, yeah, absolutely.
So the answer is we should all have guns.
Correct. You should be. I strongly and seriously advocate for everybody to become a serious, responsible gun owner, because
Do you have one in your apartment?
No, I'm in the process of getting my pistol permit, and then I will get all the guns I can. But it's not just that I want everybody to be a responsible militia member, or I want people to be able to defend themselves. Although those are things that I advocate everybody to learn. The very process of getting a gun in your state will open your eyes to exactly how rigorous the process is. I started this process, I think, like back in May, right? And I still don't have my permit.
Yeah.
Now, granted, I've been sleeping on some of it, but generally speaking, everywhere the process is not as easy as you think. Like, there's always holds, there's delays, there's waits, there's massive restrictions that you don't think about. There's paperwork out the wazoo, and everybody who thinks that getting a gun is easy, it generally is not. So I encourage everybody to get one.
Me and Carolyn are pretty okay with having a gun in the house. Like, I've thought about it. So I apologize. I realized I was laughing just there, but like, I don't disagree in the sense that like, I feel like I'd be a responsible gun owner and I would like to get a gun. I mean, I would lock it up. It'd be in a hefty safe, but like, yeah, I'm not inherently against the idea.
We'll go shooting when you get one. I would love to go shooting with you at some point. Just I mean, for those who haven't, the act of shooting a weapon, it changes your mindset about it, because and I'm not sure exactly what it is, but you sort of like assume, for some reason you get a different attitude about it, and you assume a more responsible attitude towards it. I think a lot of it is that gun owners are actually very generally responsible people, and most of the time, gun owners are not the people shooting up people. Gun owners are generally very law-abiding and responsible people. Usually it's either an illegal weapon or a stolen weapon, as most school shooters are. But just learning the process and learning gun safety, it makes you have a whole different attitude about the whole thing.
So just to clarify for you, Nate, only 22 states require, if you're buying from a private seller, that there's any background checks at all.
Right, but it's still against the law to knowingly sell a weapon to somebody who shouldn't have it.
Knowingly sell it to a felon, right? So, yeah, if you know that they're a felon, you can't sell it to them. But, like, right. If you had a gun and I came up to you and was like, hey, here's $50, can I have your gun? You're like, cool, here you go, man.
Right.
That's as easy. That's as difficult as it is to get a gun.
So, but that's not how...
more than half of the states.
In actuality, that's not how it works. So, I understand wanting to legally close that loophole. I understand that.
It works.
But in action, no. That's a hypothetical that you have in your head of some seedy guy walking into a gun show and then walking out with it. In reality, the gun show people are very responsible people. These, they've owned guns their entire life. You really have to plug into gun culture to understand this, but gun owners and gun sellers are very responsible people. They take what they do very seriously.
What is your plug into gun culture?
I was only in the military, and
okay, you don't have a gun. You don't have a gun, right? I'm asking, like, hey, I'm not trying to down you. I'm trying to ask, like, what is it you're saying? I need to plug into gun culture. So, what is your plug into gun culture? Do you live it? Do you read all these sites? Are you involved in this a lot? Like, what is it?
I recommend that everybody. I'm going to link this in the chat on the end. Let me just take a note here real quick. I recommend that everybody watches Colion Nior. He is a black man who likes guns. I don't care that he's black. He talks up gun culture a lot. He has a lot of good facts. He could blow me out of the water any day with gun facts. But he's kind of my plug-in. Plus, aside, every podcast host I listen to owns a gun, and Steven Crowder's in gun culture. So,
okay. Well, so, but do they talk about, like, how hard it is to get them at gun shows? Because I can tell you that in Ohio, where I live. You literally go to a gun show, give them some cash, and get a gun. And I have family members. I'm not going to say which ones because who knows? I don't want people to feel like I'm calling them out here. But I have a lot of family members that are very much into the gun culture, and I have firsthand experience that you walk into a showroom, find a gun you like, give them cash, and get a gun, and walk out. Yeah, maybe they say, are you a felon, or can I see your ID? That's the extent of it.
Yeah. So, I don't know. Maybe close those laws.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like on one end, it's I definitely hear what you're saying. Like, and I hear it not just to say, like, all right, I hear what you're saying, now let me combat it. But, like, I generally feel if someone's passionate enough to sell guns, that they would take it seriously. I mean, if they're at a gun show, I'm sure there's those few individuals that.
Why? Why would they?
It's not just passion. It's the people who own guns are generally the most responsible people you'll ever meet. They're very solid people. Generally, obviously there's exceptions to every rule, but
I agree. I grew up. My adopted dad.
Generally, people that own and drive cars are responsible people, but there are the few that go out and drink and drive. You need to make laws about that.
You're going to have to take my word for it for now.
No. I agree with you. I 100% agree with you. I have nothing against people owning guns. And I don't think that generally gun owners are unresponsible. I agree with you. I think generally they are responsible.
No. But not unresponsible or responsible. I'm telling you, most of these individuals are above average, very law-abiding.
They are the absolute most responsible, law-abiding people. I'm not disagreeing with that either. But most people that drive cars are law-abiding, but we still have laws against drunk driving because some people aren't, and those things put people in danger.
I do think one genuine argument I've heard that, like, is something I'm still reconciling on. I would love to hear your feedback. Is I agree. I just want to say, Tim, I agree. I think that we need to close these loopholes, especially. For at least the sake of closing the loopholes, whether or not it actually does anything, for the sake of closing the loopholes. Let's, like, just for the sake of devil's advocate, if we close them and it doesn't do anything, it's like, well, shit, it didn't do anything. But if it does something, then cool. One thing I've had trouble reconciling is most mass shooters as of right now, which is kind of the big, leverage when we talk about gun rights. It's always, and rightfully so, right? It's always at the back end of the post mayhem of mass shooter causes. One of the biggest things I've struggled with is that a significant amount of mass shooters, one, they stole a gun, or they took one from someone that they knew, or they legally acquired a gun because they passed a background check. So what do we do with that, right? Well, what do we do with that information? Can we actually say background checks are effective or not? I would love to hear your thoughts on this.
So the issue is that you can't fix crazy, right? And so one solution that somebody so in any given society, there are always going to be people who either go insane or are generally insane, right? And so one solution to that might be you say, okay, so we have to remove guns from everybody just in case these loose cannons go off. Generally, we don't agree with that. Obviously, we've already discussed the Second Amendment is viable. We should have it. There's good reasons for it. So we can't get rid of guns from everybody. We can't figure out whether people are just going to. You can.
It can be done.
You can certainly try. You can't. Look, basically, the hard truth is that there are always going to be loose cannons. What can you do about that? There's not much, because they are by very definition loose cannons, right? And so a lot of times people will snap. People will say, I never would have thought that person would have done that. Some people will say, well, I did expect that person to do that. And then the question becomes, okay, well, if you expect somebody to do it, can you get rid of their Second Amendment right? And then what's the point of having a right if people can just arbitrarily get rid of it? I will say, and it doesn't sound like I'm throwing out a lot of conclusions here, but I will say it's a very complicated discussion. And the problem is that there have been no effective, on the right, this is our argument, there have been very few effective measures proposed by the left that will curtail gun violence, right? Because
assumed effective.
But we just go by statistics, like say getting rid of a certain weapon. Like for example, right? The main thrust of the left's arguments right now is okay. So it's the background checks. It's also getting rid of AR-15s. And the problem is that, and I have this here. The problem with that is that, oh God, where is it? I promise I have it here somewhere.
The problem with that is you don't have the data.
I did.
I know, I'm just kidding.
I will say, while you look for that, one interesting thing that I think...
Hurry up, make up your shit.
Type it up real quick. No, wait, I got it. Okay. So, shooters use assault rifles in 20% of all massacres between 1982 and 2012. Yeah. And this was embedded in an article that's generally trying to, advocate for gun control. But that's a really funny way of saying that most massacres are not committed with assault rifles, right? And so,
I agree. Another interesting thing that when I was doing my research was like, Pew is a pretty nonpartisan entity.
Yeah, Pew is gold standard.
Pew is a gold standard. When I was looking up their information, one interesting thing is are we behind? How do we compare to other countries? Most other first world developed countries don't have the same gun violence issues we have. However, with that said, we are light years behind when we look at where we are versus the next extreme. We're light years ahead of Latin America, where gun violence is insane. And when you look at certain countries down there, right, like Peru, it's actually illegal to own a gun, but their gun violence is way higher than us. So these are interesting things that I'm honestly conflicted with. It's yes, we're the worst. Here's the fact: we are the worst in terms of gun-related deaths of the developed countries. However, there's no
reason to be conflicted about that. I've done very minor research on this in the past because I've always been interested in this kind of stuff. But what I think people don't want to separate in their head, but is actually a separate issue, is violence and gun ownership. Just because I own a gun doesn't mean I'm a violent person or I'm going to be violent with that gun, right? And so what the data shows is there's actually no correlation between violent crime rate and gun ownership. There is a correlation between gun ownership and gun laws and violent crimes committed with a gun. But what happens is when you ban all the guns and the guns go away, the violent crime stays about the same. It's just not with a gun anymore, right? So
right. It'll be knife attacks and
so it stays about the same. And a good one you can look at, I think it's Sweden. I think Sweden has an extremely high gun ownership rate, not as high as the U.S., but very, very high. But Sweden has a completely different socioeconomic system.
Yeah, they don't have any weapon. They don't have any ammo for those. Every house has a rifle or a semi-automatic rifle, I think, but there's no ammo.
Okay, so as far as a semi-automatic rifle goes, so you're kind of getting ahead of what I was going to say, but so they all have guns. Right. A couple things that are different, though. They have mandatory military enrollment when you turn 18 or whatever. So everybody's trained with how to use a gun. We have no mandatory training here. I, never having shot a gun before, which I have, I'm not saying I haven't, but if I had never shot a gun before, I could go out and buy a gun with no training, right? That isn't the case in Sweden. I think it's Sweden. If I'm wrong about the country, I'm going to keep saying Sweden, but if I'm wrong, so I think it's like 35% of the guns that are owned in Sweden are people that were in the military and then decided to keep their military firearm when they leave the military, because they're allowed to do that. And so there's a lot of weapons from that aspect. But on top of that, Sweden has very stringent background checks and other laws in place to keep people that shouldn't have guns from having them. And it goes back, in my mind, it goes back to just think about this logically. Like, what is more dangerous? Somebody owning a car or somebody owning a gun? And it depends on how you define dangerous, right? So let's say you use the item as intended, right? You drive a car down the road, that's how it's intended. If you use it improperly, if you're not trained properly on how to use it or whatever, a car can be deadly. But with a gun, it's very easy to be deadly. So why do we have months and months and months of training and testing and verifying that you're capable of using a car, something that you actually really need to use, right? It's not just something you should have for if you feel threatened or you want to have self-defense, or you enjoy it for a sport, or you like to go hunting. All of those, other than the defense part, I would argue all of those other reasons are hobby reasons, not requirement for social living. You don't have to have any testing or verified anything to go and buy a gun, but to drive a car, you do. So to me, the argument of saying we don't need background tests, we shouldn't have any required testing or training or requirement that people are educated on guns and how they work and what they do is kind of crazy.
So have you ever gone through the gun purchasing a firearm?
I've not purchased a firearm.
So I'm sure it's different on every state, but at least here in Connecticut,
100% is different in every state.
Correct.
It's a state law thing.
Right. So you get some.
So
training.
Connecticut is one of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 states. Connecticut is one of the 17 states that requires background checks for private sellers.
Yeah, we're pretty intense, and maybe that's the answer, right? Maybe that's the answer, is like expanding our state's policies to others. But I'll say this is one thing is when I was sharing before is when I meant to say violent deaths, I meant to say gun-related deaths. So Peru has a higher gun-related death than the United States, despite gun laws being like more incriminating than ours. But I will say this. The hardest thing that I have to reconcile with, and this is why I've been asking so many questions, because I'm trying to formulate my opinion more than anything else, is we don't need to go in the weeds of this. We already know the facts that we throw out. Our country does have higher rates of gun-related suicides. We have higher rates of gun-related accidental homicides. We have higher rates of freaking mass shootings, right? The problem that I come up with time and time again is how do I reconcile my personal beliefs of closing all these loopholes with responsible gun ownership alongside the Second Amendment, because I do firmly believe I need to ground myself in something, and I ground myself in the existing Constitution. Not everybody respects our Constitution, but I do believe that we need to collectively, as a public policy kind of like mindset, associate what we decide to do.
You've made the comment that the Constitution shouldn't change, but we've made plenty of changes in the Constitution over the history of this country, and most of them we now all agree were good changes.
With the exception of the banning of alcohol, but alongside that,
which got rechanged.
Here's a fair. You're not wrong, right? You're not wrong. We have made amendments. We've made less amendments on our founding doctrine than any other country in the world. That's pretty factual.
I will probably argue that.
No, there's
got to be a country that was like founded not too long ago that has made plus. I could be wrong, but
for the sake of the years we've had our Constitution, no other country has gone without. We've made far less. Think about that. In 300 years, relatively speaking, since the 1760s, we have only added 17 amendments with a potential of, maybe 20 corrections in total, most of them being secretarial, clerical issues. Like, all right, well, let's fucking amend like presidential. Everybody respected the presidential thing until Roosevelt, so let's amend that, right? Let's collectively speaking, 2 terms and you're out. So we ratified that. For the most part, we really haven't made significant ideological changes in our founding doctrine.
So let me address the thrust of your, and then we pretty much got to go unless there was some comments that we wanted to talk about real quick for posterity. Thanks everybody for hanging out so late. You can go if you want. We'll throw this up on YouTube afterwards. And I believe it's on Twitch. But so the conservatives will caution both of you and anybody else who wants to put additional restrictions on guns. If you break down the statistics, right? So if you were to take, say, all right, how many guns were bought in through the gun show loophole that ended up getting used in murders, it is almost always negligible. And I really do encourage people to go watch Colion Nior. He can break down all of this stuff. He'll have the actual statistics there, and he'll be able to talk about that. But the solutions that you propose, they need to actually hit the problems where they are instead of doing feel-good things. And that's why I was talking about the left trying to ban the scary AR when the AR is not responsible for the most of the shootings. And then even if you banned the gun that was responsible for the most shootings, there would be another gun that took its place and that kind of stuff. So, or once again, the gun show loophole. Like if you can affirmatively tie a whole bunch of deaths to the gun show loophole, I will be 100% behind you. Like, quick, let's close that door. Let's stop that. But the problem is that it turns out like most of the solutions that are proposed are usually they're feel-good solutions, and they will never actually have a tangible effect. For example, and then we can finish up with any ending statements you have. All of the Connecticut laws that went into effect after the Sandy Hook shooting would not have prevented the Sandy Hook shooting, right? So if all of those laws had been in place before the Sandy Hook shooting, the kids still would have gotten the gun. So with that. I think that was a great discussion.
No, this was a great discussion. I've learned a lot. I imagine I'm still, and I still will be for a long time, reconciling and developing my opinion on Second Amendment, trying to understand where I am as I measure my own like philosophical beliefs with alongside the existing governing doctrines, alongside like what you just said. The reality is, otherwise wouldn't have stopped that. And so to me, it's like, what other ways can we have stopped it? And I think that's where maybe in the future, I like to focus my energy of like, what can we actually do? Like, let's take away all the partisanship, all the political banter, and let's really say it. No one wants a mass shooter, right? No one wants that.
Right. So not on the right. Nobody wants dead kids. Nobody.
So what's
nobody wants dead anybody. This? Mass shootings don't have to happen in schools.
I'm okay with dead terrorists.
No, that's
generally not a mass shooting. That's a war effort.
Sometimes it is.
I was a senior in high school.
I hope you're not talking about someone shooting up a Muslim church.
No, what the fuck, dude?
Then why would you say a mass shooting is getting rid of terrorists? Like, what do you?
I'm just being like, it's a mass shooting, like a whole bunch of them died, real quick because the C-130 was flying overhead. And
that's a military operation, like I just said.
Yeah, a massive
that's
shooting.
Totally different.
Isn't that what we're talking about?
Little different, but when we're talking about domestic mass shooting,
even Trump's base isn't going to agree with you on that one.
What? No, they'll love that.
No, they would love that. We're gonna have a bunch of Trump supporters next week. But I guess just to wrap up my thoughts, consider this my closing statement. When Sandy Hook happened, and it was like just absolutely just this debilitating event, and so I guess where I would like to focus my energy is adjacent and reconciling the Second Amendment and understanding our country, but also at the same time, let's have a real discussion on kind of what can we do, genuinely speaking, to prevent future mass shootings. What do we know about all existing mass shootings is something I would like to look into and say, all right, what do we really do in the future what are some sweeping reforms that could have stopped a majority of these? Not all of them, but a majority. And I guess that's where I'll leave my thoughts.
And I would agree at looking those as long as they didn't undercut the Second Amendment. Tim?
So I guess my stance is the Second Amendment is something that's been around for a long time and can be amended further or changed or whatever if need be. I'm not saying it needs to be. I don't know. I've not done enough thought or looking into this. My general stance is I think people should be able to own guns. I think we all agree that the right people should be able to own guns and the wrong people shouldn't. God, that'd be a perfect world, right? So I don't think that there's a disagreement there. And I think that it's important that we kind of say, like, we all have the same feeling, which is, you know, if there was no gun violence, if nobody was out there shooting other people or the wrong people, none of the wrong people had guns, we would all be like, yeah, fine, have a gun, go shoot at a range, have it in your house, like whatever, no mistakes ever happen, right? We all agree with that. I think where the disagreement comes in is the benefit of having guns in specific situations, does it outweigh the tragedies that happen if they're in those situations, and how do we find this happy medium, right? So my feeling is we need better gun control from a background check and training and testing perspective, but I think I'm fine with people having AR-15s or rifles or handguns or shotguns or whatever, right? Like, I don't think, in my opinion, it's the type of gun that matters. Yes, one gun does more damage than another, is more, problematic than the other in other situations. But I'll tell you, I'd rather get shot by an AR-15 than a shotgun at close range, right? Like, it depends on how you're using the gun. So, and accidents are going to happen, right? I have a colleague, an old colleague from a previous career, who told me a story. This is him. This isn't like heard it from. Like, this is no bullshit. A guy he was sleeping. His dad had a shotgun in the house, and his dad always kept a round in the chamber. And my friend woke up and heard noises coming from the garage, which was downstairs, I guess, from where he was at. And so he went into the bedroom, tried to wake up his dad. His dad didn't wake up. So he grabbed the shotgun and went down to the door that goes into the garage. He opened the garage door, and as he did it, there was a guy with a bunch of stuff in his arms that he was stealing, coming up the stairs. And my friend pointed the gun at him because of muscle memory, TV, whatever, cocked the gun, got the round out of the chamber in doing so. Right? And it only had one round in it. It wasn't like fully loaded. And then pulled the trigger to fire, and it didn't fire because of it. But the guy didn't know that there was no more rounds in it and that he had pulled the trigger, freaked out, dropped the shit, and ran off. But that guy would be dead had it not been a crazy situation. So now, again, don't take this as the guy didn't deserve it. He broke into the guy's house, was stealing shit. I'm not trying to... But the point is, like, my friend, in talking to him, is happy that he didn't kill that guy, right? So guns, the point I was trying to make is having a gun readily available can make a situation that doesn't have to be life or death turn into life or death. So there's a lot more to think about than just saying, I need it to be able to defend myself, because sometimes situations don't turn into that. To get back to my general feeling, though, I want more training. I want required training. I want someone that owns a gun to have at least somehow shown that they know how to use it. I want someone that drives a car to have at least shown that they know how to drive a car, right? That's not something that is crazy for us to believe. So why is it hard for us to believe that you should have some sort of requirement to know how to use a gun before you own one? And I do think that we need to have background checks, universal background checks on all sales, no matter where. And I don't mean like every time you sell a gun, have a background check, like maybe every 3 to 5 years, similar to when you retest for driving a car. You go out and you recertify that you're allowed to own a gun. And so when I go to if I go to your house, Nate, and I'm like, hey, I want to buy a gun. I say, here's my card. It shows I'm allowed to have a gun. And you look at it and you say, cool. And you take a picture of it or whatever, and you submit it when you do the sale and the change of registration. Great. Like, I don't think it needs to be super hard and difficult, but I do think that it needs to be a little bit further than where it is.
Maybe. All right. And with that, looks like Chris's camera went out there. So with that, thanks everybody for sticking around. We went a little late tonight. We started a little late tonight, so we definitely appreciate that. So if you found this funny, insightful, informational, useful, go ahead and share it with people. That way we can get 99 million subscribers by the time the election rolls around. We can lower the temperature in the country so we don't have a second civil war. Other than that, thanks for watching. We really, really appreciate it, and have a good night.
Good night, everyone. Thanks for growing with us as we learn how to do this.